Hey everyone, this is Ash Mustashi. Welcome back to my channel. And if you know where that clip came from, then you have my heart. Or I don't know about that, maybe a little too much, but that is the Behelit from the Berserker anime series. Well, manga to anime. And I've been wanting for the longest time to make a little diorama for it, especially like one that has like the Behelit on top of it, where like it has the bones layered up, just to show the destruction and sacrifices that were caused for the Behelit to activate. Now that I've been working a little more with air dried clay and resin, I was like, I need to finally be able to make this because I have all the material I need and I think it's time to make it. So right now you'll just see me take a piece off of the air dry clay that I've been using. So far I like it. This time I am using gloves because last time it was just really messy and I get this weird feeling of just like too much clay on my hands. I'm just like constantly feel like I'm messing it up more because I'm creating indentations or imperfections where I don't need it. So I figured let me try putting on these gloves and working from there just to at least get the base of it. So I'm just reactivating it because it's been sitting in a container. I tried sealing it up as best I could, but I use water just to reactivate it. Since it's air dry clay, you can just add water or soak it in, and it will reshape itself and revert back to a more manageable material. Right now, I'm just trying to make sure I get it compressed down into egg shape that it is known for. Just trying to keep like air pockets out and trying to get the moisture throughout the whole clay. That way, there's no cracks. Now that we're done forming the egg shape of the Behelit, I made all of these bones, just different sizes and shapes. I'm not really paying attention to the human anatomy. And then I made the base using some foil and then wrapping it around just to save on clay. I had to constantly, I think it took like about 2.5 days for it to really finish drying. I had to keep repositioning it. Just to make sure it was fully dry from the top to the bottom. So now with the remaining clay that I have that I didn't really think about making sure I had plenty enough of, I'm making the nose, the eyes, and the lips that are on the Behelit. I didn't do a good job recording this only because it's a weird angle to try and show what I was doing and trying to get the better details. Hopefully in the future I'll start watching more videos just to help figure out better angles to comfortably work um, with the projects I'm doing, and then making sure like you guys can actually see what I'm doing because I'm back and forth with recording on my camera that is mounted up top and then on my phone, which will show more of the leveled angle. So it's just trying to figure that out. So bear with me. I think I just did the nose and just kind of kept working it to the point where I just turned off the camera. So I realized with air dry clay, water is your best friend because I was having a little trouble, as you can see, and then I realized the best way to do it was to make sure it's positioned right. It's the size that I want, and use a little extra clay on the side, wet it down, and it kind of adhered to it. So after getting the pieces on to the egg portion, I moved on after everything was cured, making a base. So I mixed some gesso and some paints together, just like a black and red paint that I just found at Dollar Tree. I wasn't really trying to get a perfect shade, just to get a base color, because I'm just going to cover it up with a texturized kind of mess and painting over red anyway for the Behelit. So I'm just mixing that up and applying that over both the base and the Behelit. So I got this mold on sale. I think I was at Michael's, and I always go in their clearance section and always find at least one mold for resin to test out. So this was actually perfect. I had an original plan of I found like these little domes at Dollar Tree that I wanted to do like a miniature kind of thing, but then I opted for a bigger scale. So this actually worked out. It's a stained glass kit. I think maybe in the future I'll try it out. I tested out the resin that's a UV resin, and it didn't really, they were not that pigmented. So if I ever do use it, I'll probably um, try it out, but add like more pigment to it just to make it maybe a little bit more vibrant. So now I am setting the scale, clearing it out so that shows that I have the tier in, and adding parts A and B so I can get at least like the first layer. I wanted to do one thin layer just to have a base before I put the mount on it. So after stirring about like 5 minutes or so, just to make sure everything was cohesive with parts A and B, and then let it sit so the bubbles will just come to the surface. I usually just use a heat gun just to get some of those bubbles out, and then I try to pour at like a high distance just to help pop the bubbles more. Um, there wasn't enough resin. There was not enough resin, so I kind of just did the best I could. I did not think this was, I thought it was going to be enough. I thought it was going to be enough. I tried scraping the sides as best I can, but once I bring in the heat gun, it helped it spread at the bottom of the layer, but it was a little more thinner than I would have anticipated or wanted it for the project. But yeah, you live and you learn. Sometimes I underdo it instead of just overdo it with certain things. But here's my horrible attempt at trying to spread it all over. But like I said, once I bring out the heat gun, it helps thin it out a bit, but was not enough where I would have wanted the base to attach to it. But it is what it is. I was able to work with it with no issues. So here I have the base. I gotta stop calling it the base, but pretty much this is where the Behelit's gonna be posted up on. So it's just the mountain of bones and gravel and dirt, but pretty much I'm using UV resin, and then I'm going to cure that to the actual base. Here, now that it's cured, I waited like a day or two just to make sure. This could have been executed a lot better. Let's put it that way. It was a great idea in my head, but I should have paid a little more attention to how much I put on and um, just showing how I actually cured it. When I flip it over, there's I got like drippage from the UV coming down on the little mountain piece. So it still worked. I just had to clean it up a little bit without disturbing the paint that I put on there. But it worked. It wasn't a good process, and I'll have to think of a better way, even if I have to use like the industrial glue that I have to that I usually go and use. But all in all, it worked. It did the job that I needed for. Either way, it's just gonna get covered in actual actual resin. So this is me just trying my best. I think I busted out my actual I have a UV lamp somewhere. But yeah, this is me weathering the bones. So another mistake I made, because I love showing this to you guys, because like I said, this is all learning experience. I use water and paint on air dry clay. This is not the oven baked clay. I should have maybe used Mod Podge in the paint, only because it got soft as water was touching the clay, which reactivates it to a more softer texture. Um, so next time I will have to think about that, or just use the oven baked clay, which I do have. I'll eventually use that, but it was just easier to use air dry clay since I'm still kind of just working, trying to figure it out. So I used E6000 to glue the Behelit on top of the little mountain. And now I'm creating the black sludge and dirt. I found this sand over at Dollar Tree. So I mixed that with some Mod Podge and some more black. And it actually worked out pretty well. It was just really hard to just move it around a little bit until I found like the consistency that worked best for me. But I just tried to get it where it wasn't like too much cement, but more manageable. I pretty much, yeah. I made some DIY cement that kind of helped me out just to get the texture I wanted. Um, so that was pretty much it. Just no measurements or anything besides just seeing how it looked and where I was satisfied with, is it gonna stick to it or not. So all in the head. So as I finish applying this, I make sure I'm not missing any spots. It looks pretty good, and now I'm just placing the bones. No rhyme or reason of where everything's being put. I'm hoping that the mixture with Mod Podge keeps it up, which thankfully it did. I just had to be really careful because the clay was really thin and I kept breaking a couple of the bones. And it was really frustrating, but I just had to be a little more delicate and just have some patience with making sure everything fit and stuck where it needed to be. If it fell, it fell. If it got placed in a weird angle, I just kept it. Just going with the flow with putting these bones on. So now I'm just getting down to the base color of red. I tried using that cheap red and it was all right. It gave like a nice like a dark tone to it, so I can just build up on it. I wasn't mad at it. I just kept I did like one layer of the red and then I used like my acrylic paints that I actually have to just highlight where it needed to be and kind of just created like this texture. I like how it came out, so you know, I'm very easygoing with that. Comes out how it is, I'm not gonna complain about it as long as it just doesn't look too terrible. So now I'm going in with the red acrylic paint that I have, just kind of dry brushing on to make like where blood splatter or just more weathered um bloody mess pretty much. I just wanted to just paint the gravel of it and the bones and kind of just have it bleed down um eventually into the resin that I'll put over it. So as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of just not really giving much direction for it. It's just where I think it would look all right and kind of cohesive with everything. So here's the resin from that glass stain kit. Um, I tried it out and you'll see like on the side of the plastic mat where like it just doesn't look very very opaque. It's too translucent for me. So I added some I have like some alcohol inks that I dropped in just to make it a little bit more, you know, close to the blood look. So now I'm just using a dry brush method with black around the creases and trying to make it look aged and more antiqued. It's been around for a very long time, so trying to give that detail to it as best as possible. So now I'm pretty much all done. I made a bigger batch of resin, and just pouring it over the piece because I've pretty much done everything that I needed, everything to stay in place. I was contemplating whether or not to put resin over the Behelit because I kind of like the matte look, but to preserve it a little longer, I just opted to do it that way. Um, I just want to make sure everything's getting coated and just running across. I ended up using a brush that I didn't care about just to make sure like the resin wasn't pulling in certain areas because I don't like that globby look that sometimes resin leaves off. So I tried to help push it down, um, the Behelit, and make sure it's just as thin as possible so you still see the definition of certain spots. So once I was done focusing on the top and making sure everything was thin as possible and making sure all the crevices on the mountain of bones was covered, I ended up breaking, I think, one or two bones being a little too heavy handed. Um, but now I'm just focusing on the actual base and making sure the resin's filled up to where I need it to be, and making sure it's actually filling up in the back as well. I had to kind of use the popsicle stick to just make sure it was getting guided back there. So now using the leftover resin I have, I'm taking red alcohol ink. Oop, always dropping stuff. The red, and I think I have a dark cherry and black. Just creating swirls um from the blood that would be dripping down, and just I kind of wanted to make almost dark matter coming from the mountain, and it kind of worked, but not as I really envisioned. But either way, it still came out pretty nice. This is probably my more successful resin batches where it doesn't have too much bubbling of everything. Like, I was really taking my time with the heat gun and making sure like there was no bubbles or anything um that's gonna make it where you couldn't see the details of the swirls that I'm gonna do. So one thing I did notice while using the heat gun, the bones turned from this white to like a beige. I don't know if it'll show up on camera or not, but once again, I'm not mad at it. It threw me off. I probably have to check that out. Um, but once again, a learning experience, but something I wanted to share because you can kind of tell right here where it's like not white. The bones are like giving an aged look, which is fine. It works perfectly for what I'm doing, so I really can't complain. But just thought I'd throw that in there. So here it is, all cured. I think I waited quite a bit because I wanted to make sure. I think I waited more than like 2, 3 days because I was just really nervous. Like, I really usually fail with resin pieces, and another bone. That's probably like the third one I broke off. At this point, it's just go with the flow. I'm over it. But I'm really happy how this came out, and I'm still debating whether I want to create a base for it. But this is, you see, this is where I had used the UV resin to mount um, the base to it. But other than that, it came out great, and I cannot complain. So here are some crappy ass angles. Too lazy to too lazy to make it look nice, but thank you for tuning in, and like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.